Casey, and welcome, Lisbeth. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. It's been an absolute delight to see your work in the gallery and part of the exhibit. And if you can just imagine a bunch of art campers walking around it and thinking about what the narrative might be and just remarking on your technique. And so on behalf of Bergstrom-Mahler, I deeply thank you for your time. And I'm curious, I'm sure you'll say where you're zooming from, but you have a gorgeous, gorgeous background for us to look at too. I just want to take a moment to thank the donors of the exhibit New on View. Through the remarkable generosity of those people, the exhibit is a 3-year view of works that have been gifted to the museum. And out of, I think, Casey, something like over 700 works, we selected about 200 to be put on view, which is a really remarkable thing to think about the generosity of people and their philanthropic spirit. I want to thank Jill and her late husband, Jack Pelisek, for donating Lisabeth's piece. It was absolutely delightful to see Jill and her family touring the galleries this weekend. And through her generosity, we actually had a lovely connection to you, Lisabeth. So I think that's just remarkable. And I also want to thank Casey for the sensitive and thoughtful curatorial largesse for this exhibition. It's really stunning. And again, just great job. And just welcoming all of our attendees tonight. We really just deeply appreciate the support and listening in. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say, Lisabeth.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am going to unmute now. I'm also guilty of the muting. Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you for the welcome. And thank you everyone for coming out this evening for the third of 3 presentations offered as a part of Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass's current exhibition, New on View, which, as Amy mentioned, celebrates donors and their gifts to the museum's permanent collection during the past 3 years. A special welcome as well to Jill Pelisek, and I do see Jill is logged in this evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was truly a pleasure getting to show you and your family around the museum this past weekend and getting to show off as a part of New on View your 4 recent donations, including a gift of the work of Lisabeth Sterling, who we have the great fortune of speaking with this evening. My name is Casey Eichhorn, and I am the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions here at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass, and I'll be facilitating this evening's conversation with Lisabeth Sterling. Before we get started with that presentation and conversation, I do want to just share with you a few notes concerning the mechanics for how we run our Zoom webinars. Obviously, you are able as a viewer to see Lisabeth Sterling, myself, and then 3 of my esteemed colleagues here. For the most part, it will be Lisabeth and myself talking, and you'll see us for 95% of the presentation this evening. I mention that because we do want to make sure that if you have questions for Lisabeth this evening, that you're able to ask them. You are welcome to ask your questions using the Zoom Q&A feature, which will, for most of you, be located at the very bottom of the screen. It looks like 2 thought bubbles superimposed on one another, and it says Q&A. However, if you're not able to find the Q&A feature, you're also welcome to ask your questions inside of our chat function. I've spoken with Lisabeth about this, and she is perfectly happy answering questions mid-conversation. And so if you have your question and you think it's particularly pertinent to what we're talking about right now, I would love for you to ask it, and then I will do my best to make sure to pass that along to Lisabeth during the presentation. If you think of something later too, we can always use time at the end of the presentation this evening to make sure your question gets asked. One other part of this is that we are recording this evening's conversation. This will be made available on the museum's YouTube page. Probably by Friday at the latest, it will be up and available for you to rewatch or for you to share with friends and family. So without further ado, I'd love to take an opportunity to introduce to you our fantastic artist, Lisabeth Sterling. And I, of course, have my father calling me on the telephone at the most inopportune time here. Fortunately, I remembered to turn my ringer off this evening. I will call him back after this evening's presentation. Mentioning my father, I also do want to mention real quickly that Lisabeth has with her this evening her daughter, Tristan. And Tristan's going to be helping in an instance of any technical issue. Tristan will be here to assist if necessary. I don't think that it will be necessary. We've practiced once, but we know it's always nice to have a backup anyhow. So
Taylor,
now,
Casey, can I ask one thing?
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
love to take a quick Zoom photo. Is that possible? If I can
Take
get
away.
John and Taylor, can you guys pop back on the camera? Is that okay, Lisabeth and daughter?
Oh,
So we can take a
absolutely.
quick picture?
Mhm.
Because, sorry, I'm fan geeking here. So, all right.
There's Kitty.
So, is John coming in? Oh, shoot. Let me try this one more time. Okay. All right. So you say love glass.
Love glass.
Of glass.
Thanks, guys.
So without further ado, I shall now introduce to you artist Lisabeth Sterling. Lisabeth has always drawn pictures. However, the first drawings that she really took seriously were made in high school. She would sit under a tree for hours using the patterns of shadows to suggest imagery. At the University of Arts, formerly the PCA, and the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, she studied drawing and painting and would work from the figure by day and then go home and draw from her imagination. At night, she set up half a dozen lights all around her and used the shadow of her left hand as a starting point while drawing with her right. Glass entered her life after art school. Pilchuck gave her exposure to a multitude of ideas and approaches. She discovered that she could scribble on glass as her starting point and draw with a Sharpie before engraving cameo glass. She was able to integrate her favorite way of expressing herself with the intensity of colored glass. She says she's come full circle. Engraving isn't so different from the pencil drawings that she made back in high school. Lisabeth, thank you for being here this evening.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. When you asked me to write a paragraph or two about my inspiration, I started to think about how I started seriously drawing back in high school and thought, well, I would do a little bit of a demo, sort of my approach to getting started with the engravings. And I started with paper. So I want to. Sure. So when I was sitting underneath a tree, I would see the shadows from the cast from the leaves above. And when I was indoors, I would use the shadows from my hand as a starting point. So I might start just sort of using the shapes and moving them around, and then I would use keep it kind of loose, and then start to see things in the scribbles. So I might see a face here, or maybe another here. And so these would just be kind of light and airy drawings. I wouldn't worry too much about what I was drawing. I would just allow it to happen. Sometimes I would color things in. Sometimes I would intensify the image here or there. Later on, when I started to draw on glass, the approach was very similar. I would take a blank or a sheet of glass and start scribbling on that. So sometimes I would see reflections in the glass, and that would suggest something. Or sometimes I would just try to keep it loose and make my way around the glass object and try not to impose anything upon it and just let it happen. So then after I got started, I would like, what do I see in there? Oh, here's a face. I tend to gravitate towards faces. I think because I found it so difficult to look into the eyes of other people as a young person. And it became more and more of my focus. He's kind of silly looking. When I am working on this as a non-demo piece, I will end up spending hours on a single piece, just and usually the scale ends up being a little bit different, simply because I have amount of time. I usually end up using images of figures that are in a lot of different scales added together. So I might have a great big face next to a smaller one, or have them overlap one another. Like I might have a smaller face come out the side here, just sort of peeking in. When I am drawing, I try not to impose too much thought upon what I am drawing, because it's more spontaneous that way. But I'm also not sure how much you can see from what I'm drawing.
I think we can. I'm actually quite surprised as to how well I can see it from my end,
Okay.
Elizabeth. And the benefit of a Sharpie here being that if you make a mistake, obviously that's not the final step of creating these beautiful cameo carvings. You can just take, is it acetone or?
This is a little bit of alcohol on a rag, so I can make big changes very easily. It makes it easy to be loose and free with the imagery, which is kind of the opposite of the approach I'll be, when I'm engraving it, everything becomes very tight and very deliberate. You have to commit yourself to a particular image once you start engraving. But yeah.
And so this would be an interesting time to mention something. Pat Rosnack had a question here, specifically with regards to the vase forms. And I know that you'll probably talk about this more in your presentation, but as the question was just asked, you mentioned to me in our conversation the answer to this yesterday, because I also had the same question. But Pat was asking with regards to the white light from the void piece that was given to us by Jill Pelisek. There's actually a puncture in the vessel itself, basically an orifice that goes through one side of the vessel, but not all the way through both sides. I imagine that was the vessel was given to you in that manner, with that orifice already existing. Is that correct?
So I would go into the hot shop and work with glass blowers. I'd have drawings of the vessels that I would like to have blown, and as well as bring color bars. And one of the things that we were doing for a while was to push in the glass so that there was an indentation while it was still hot. I would make in the blowing sessions maybe maybe 6 or 8 vessels for that day, and that would be enough for the year of engraving. Sometimes, depending upon the size, we might do 2 days of blowing a year. But the glass becomes very fixed at that point. However, I am able to cut the pieces quite a bit, and for instance, I could make large openings into the piece, cutaway sections. This particular piece, I'll probably have an irregular edge and open up the inside at some point because it has an inner wall, and I'll want to be able to see that feature. And the inner wall was made from taking the glass vessel when it was still hot and squeezing the sides together until they touched, and blocking them in again so there was a good section that was touched, and then blowing it out again. And the membrane that touched would stretch out, and that became the inner wall. So we worked the different aspects of the shape in the hot shop, and then I'm able to work different aspects of the shape later in the cold shop in my studio.
Great. I saw here that Taylor just mentioned, and Taylor's our studio manager here at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass. She mentions that she says your work inspires me, and it directly influenced her thesis work. And she says she knows the word grawl means that it would be reheated and shaped. But do you have a word for the work that you do based on what you described?
I think it's pretty straightforward cameo glass, where when it's blown, there's a layer of colored glass that I engrave through. I think the grawl method is really a lot of fun. I haven't done it though because I didn't have regular access to a hot shop, because you would need to blow the blank that you would engrave and then bring it back to the hot shop in order to work it further.
Sure.
But I explored the cold working of the pieces pretty thoroughly. I like being able to manipulate the glass with simple tools at home, in my home studio.
And isn't that one of the great benefits of working cold and working in cameo, is that not to say that you don't need a lot of equipment, but you don't need a furnace
No.
or a hot shop.
And I use a handheld tool. There are a number of engravers that use lathes, but my start in the art world involved drawing with a pencil and painting using a handheld implement. So I started engraving first with a flex shaft, and then switched over to a micromotor, also handheld, in order to engrave. It also enabled me to work at a larger scale than what someone would be able to do with a lathe, because you'd have to hold the glass for hours at a time with the lathe.
Sure.
And when I'm engraving on a piece, I make a cradle for it to sit in over a light box. And that way, the only weight I'm holding is basically the drawing tool.
And that's fantastic. And then that gives us a better insight into how you are able to see what it is that what you're working on too. I know that a lot of folks are fascinated by process specifically. And so.
Well, when I started drawing working from scribbles or from the shadows, I really wasn't thinking about why I was doing that or what kind of imagery I got from it. But I came to realize later that it was kind of like kind of looking at ink blots or at the clouds in the sky. And it's kind of an access to subconscious imagery. And so it's a way, I used it as a way to explore issues. And when I show some of my slides, I think you'll understand what I'm saying about that.
Fantastic. I hope that answered your question, Taylor.
Should we go to the slideshow? And it seems like
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And for those of you who didn't catch it, Lisabeth is at her home right now on Whidbey Island in Washington, which is just west of Seattle. So that's where she's zooming from this evening. We're just talking about her wonderful garden that she has and her Japanese maple.
So here is an image, Life on an Emotional Roller Coaster. So this was a series I did when I first started engraving glass. It was combining painting on glass with engraved glass on a glass that I could buy at a stained glass store, a flashed glass. It's a hand-blown glass, but it's sold as a flat sheet. I would engrave it and then paint it and fire it in a kiln to give it to both fire the paints and to curve the glass so that it was a little bit more dimensional. So when I was talking about using my drawing on glass as a way to access the subconscious and deal with issues, this was kind of the start of it. This is Father's Sedated Let's Play. I guess I had father issues that I was working with. And consuming relationship and issues with, it was right about the time I was going through a divorce. And ended up moving on from that relationship. When at one point I started drawing on white cameo glass, and it felt a lot like returning to my roots with the drawing with graphite on paper. The effect is very similar. And I ended up also working with copper as a sort of a continuation of the image of the engraved glass. So it's etched copper and engraved cameo, white cameo glass.
And what's the, I'm just out of curiosity for this particular piece or in general, what kind of scale are we talking about with regards to your wall pieces, the copper pieces?
So I would say that piece is a total of 30 inches, maybe.
Okay, 30 inches high.
Yeah.
So pretty sizable creations then.
Yeah, they started out fairly small, and kind of grew. The previous piece was about 20 inches by 20 inches.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I started working on vessels. The shapes of the vessels would sometimes suggest the imagery. And I enjoyed working with the vessels themselves as sculptural objects. And I enjoy a technical challenge. So cutting the glass and working with that was actually a lot of fun to me. This is I Heart Mom. I did a lot of mother pieces out of red glass. And this was one of a number of them. And this particular shape suggested cornucopia to me. So again, the shape suggested a lot about the imagery. And the tail of a cat, when I started working on this vessel, I couldn't get the idea of a cat walking away from me out of my mind. So it became part of the piece. This one was an inner wall piece, like the piece I was drawing on earlier. And I like to be able to open them up so you can see what's going on inside of the glass. Also, I like to be able to see both sides of the vessel. A lot of times when you walk around a vessel or rotate it, you're able to, the composition changes. And with the more transparent pieces, as I'm drawing on them, I'm also drawing what I see through the glass, as well as on the surface that I'm working with. And sometimes I went with some rather large pieces. This one was probably about 2 feet tall. Had some of my mega series, Trial by Fire.
Mary Ellen Viksta is one of our docents here at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass, and she wanted to mention this: the eyes in your faces are very distinctive. She asks if this is a conscious, is this conscious part of your art? Are you doing? Is that just the way you learn to draw eyes, or are you intending for the viewer to focus on that aspect of the figure?
I found that I was very uneasy looking into another person's eyes. It actually took a lot of effort for me, and so I ended up focusing on the eyes, because if I was drawing somebody, I needed to be able to do it. And they say the eyes are the windows to the window to the soul, and I think there's some truth to that. It makes me, but it does make me feel nervous. A lot of times I can't even really remember what somebody looks at like until I take some effort to look at them for a while and focus on the way their features work together. The eyes are important.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Some of what some of the images I dealt with had to do with issues that I was going through at the time, and this one was post-surgical relief. I had just gone through breast cancer, and it was like surgery, and I was very thankful for the medical relief from that. And this was Susie Homemaker and her carnivorous houseplants. And I thought it was interesting how Susie took care of her home and her family, and they all were very consuming. And we have a rapidly beating heart. And I was thinking about how how the beating of a heart translates into excitement uh, and also how a tiny creature like a hummingbird, their hearts beat very quickly versus a person whose heart is much slower. So not only is the hummingbird buzzing around, but he's living his life very quickly. And kind of wondering about how, if we slow down, do we actually extend our lives and extend the enjoyment of our lives?
The hummingbird imagery that you have here, there is some bird imagery in the white light from the void piece at Bergstrom-Mahler. Pat was asking, and I believe the answer to this is yes, but she was asking if that particular piece did have a window through it, a cut window, and I believe it did.
It did.
Okay. Just in the front where you could see the hummingbird was actually on the opposite side of the vessel. And it's okay if you're not able to jump back. Don't worry about it, Elizabeth.
Okay, yeah, not with this feature. And here we have used the right bait. I was thinking it in terms of how if you don't use the right bait with fish, you don't really catch the fish you're looking for. And it kind of relates to relationships. If you don't present yourself as in a way that's appealing, you certainly won't be able to attract someone who's looking for an appealing relationship. I like, I've used fish imagery quite a lot. I like waves. I like the motion of the underwater plants, as well as sort of people in the wind and in the waves.
I wasn't sure if maybe there was some mermaid imagery in that or not. Just from this angle, I wasn't completely certain about that. Is that the mythological aspect? I know that you've explored that a little bit with regards to certain pieces. Did that include some of that, or was I just not?
I'm not sure that one does. I might have a swimmer. Not sure. That piece will be in rotation in a video soon, so we'll be able to take a look at that one. Let's see. I've used a lot of animal imagery, and this particular one, the guy has a cat on his head because cats are kind of demanding, and so when you say fetch and carry, it's the dog will fetch and the cat has to be carried.
Kathy Richardson also has a question for you, Elizabeth. She's asking here, are you engraving on both sides of the pieces? So the question specifically is, are you engraving on the inside as well as the outer surface in your pieces that are cut open? So the pieces that have the cutting.
Most of them are engraved solely on the outside. And then when you look into the piece, you're able to see the engraving that is on the outside. It's a little bit of an optical illusion, but when the pieces have large cutouts, you look into them and you see the engraving that's on the outside, but it looks like it's on the inside. And it's more shiny, and again, we'll be able, when we have the pieces in rotation, you'll get a better idea of how that works. On this one, you can see the cutout of near the top. It's kind of spiky, and then you can see the person on the other side, so near the top.
This is a kitchen motif, is it not? I think I remember seeing this from another, oh, it says midnight snack. I'm imagining that it is. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It's a common activity.
For me
And
as well.
yeah, okay. Ah, and there we go, silk flowers. And I put this one in the end because it has kind of a projection of the imagery with the light coming through. And since I was using basically projections or shadows to start my drawings, I thought this was an appropriate one to end with.
Jim asks, your drawing has Byzantine era qualities. I can certainly see that in certain imagery. Do you have any particular artistic or historic style influencers in the way that you design your figures, Elizabeth?
I don't really think of it as approaching them in a particular way. It's just the way that I draw. And some of the look that the figures take on is affected by the tools that I use. Like, for instance, the size of the burr that I use to engrave may affect the way I can carve things like the eyelids. We're getting a truck driving by. It's not a common occurrence. Oh, it's FedEx going to a neighbor's house.
Mute yourself for a minute.
Oh, well, it'll go by soon.
It's not terrible, to be honest.
It's coming to our house, actually.
Oh,
We're getting a
congratulations.
delivery.
Who knew?
Yeah. Oh, and the dog is barking. This is real life. My daughter is queuing up some pieces in rotation, so you'll have something interesting to look at. And oops, it's jittery. What's going on there?
It looks pretty smooth on our end, or at least on my end. I'm not seeing a lot of shaking or anything.
I can't hear him at the moment. There, now it's smooth. Now it's not.
Are you able to hear me now, Elizabeth? I can still hear you, but
I don't know, where is.
Sorry, we're having technical difficulties for a moment.
no worries.
Okay, so go back to Zoom.
We are able to see the piece rotating, and it is not shaky or jittery for us.
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
And
It's hard to see.
I'm having a hard time seeing in the light.
Yeah. The technical issues involved with being outside.
Shoot.
Well, the piece is in rotation. Well,
As long as you can hear them.
okay. I don't think I can. There we go.
We can hear you just fine. So if you can't hear us, I apologize, but we can hear you and we can see the pieces rotating.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I wonder if we should start over with the rotating pieces. And then, do they get larger, or is that it? Okay. Okay, so here's a piece, Acer versus Cannabis in rotation. And Acer is what you call a maple tree. And leaves such as the one behind me, the lace leaf maple, is frequently confused with marijuana leaves. So when I have been drawing them in the past, people have asked me if I was drawing pot leaves, and and it's not. So So that's where the name for this one came from. And this is the piece that Casey had asked if there was a mermaid in it. And I can, with the reflections outside, I can't really examine it totally carefully, but I guess you'll be able to see.
Are you still able to hear us okay now, Elizabeth?
You're a little, not very loud, but I can hear you, yes.
Okay. It does look like these are, for us, they're rotating very smoothly. So
Oh, good.
I think folks are able to see them.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yep.
And this is the midnight snack piece, I believe. So as it's rotating, you can see both the front and the back. And I think it makes the imagery more interesting. The transparent cameo glass, the areas that are shadows then are very transparent, and you can see into the other side. And I thought it was kind of interesting. When I was a painter, I would use transparents in order to make shadows to give them depth. So it was kind of interesting that I ended up using the transparent areas for shadows with the glass. And the lighter areas are engraved, and the darker areas are the glass as it originally was when it was blown. So by taking a little bit of color away at a time, I'm able to get gradations in colors, or if I remove it completely, the glass is more becomes white looking to you. And let's see, this was a shard that I did honoring Tesla. It was a commission. I don't often do commissions, but it was fun. I have done a couple of commissions. I did one for Paul Stankert based upon a poem called Old Ireland. And then another piece I did involved a number of interviews with the client, and then I was able to do a vessel that was based upon her life and her experiences.
Is that the example that's in front of us right now, Elizabeth?
No, this one has to do with getting a puppy and discovering all the plants in the yard that I had to remove so that the dog wouldn't get poisoned by them. Oh, and we seem to be back to the one with the ocean theme.
I think did you say there are 7 of them total, if I remember correctly?
I think so. Yeah, the last one is green. Okay. But as you see, you can look in through the waves and to see the piece. And oh, we're back to, looks like we're in rotation. So we're back to the cat it's on the head. Oh, that's right. We did them over. So the fetch and carry. Well, there had to be some technical issues, right?
And that's okay. We're accustomed to having technical issues from time to time. I think that I think that we're all very used to being on Zoom now, and so I wouldn't worry about it. I have a question for you though, pertaining to some of the images on rotation. And it's not necessary to jump back to any particular one. You mentioned that you do have, and this is a good example here actually. You mentioned that you do have from time to time the ability to do cutting on the lips of the vase forms. When you do that, so using this piece or the wave piece, is all of that cutting inward, is that your work, or is the vase blown that way when there's significant cutting? So for example, even on this piece, I imagine that this was done while the piece was, or just after the piece was removed, and that was cut later, this side or this this embellishment here on the sides of this piece.
So the when they're blown, the vessels have often a very small opening at the top, and then I cut the larger openings into them. So for instance, on this particular piece that we're looking at, you can see that there's jagged edge like around the leaves, and then it opens up into a smoother edge, but there's actually quite a large opening on this piece.
Sure.
And
And so
that's
that,
all done at home, at my home studio, and after it's been blown.
I guessed as much, just based on the some of the jagged edges and the quality of those edges, but I thought I would ask that just to be certain.
Oh, okay. Should we go back to just, okay. So, oh, there we are. Hi, back to us.
Pat Rosnack mentioned here just a moment ago, she asked, have you ever experimented with blowing glass yourself, or does that just, you're happy with doing the cameo engraving and that's what you love to do? And, you're in a very well-regarded area in terms of glass art in general, right? And you have some talented glass blowers around as well. Is that something you've ever dabbled in?
I actually was blowing glass before I was engraving. I moved to Minneapolis and was developed an interest in glass, but I wanted to paint on glass because I drew and painted flat surfaces, so it seemed like a natural thing to do. But there was nobody there who wanted to teach painting on glass. However, I found glass blowing classes and took those for a couple of years before discovering Pilchuck. And once I started going to Pilchuck, I was able to learn to paint on glass and a number of different techniques before I found engraving. And I kind of latched on to engraving when I was a TA for Judah Schechter, and I used a Fordham drill for about 10 minutes, and just it really felt like it was what I needed to be doing. So, and I get really compulsive about things, so I immediately put the engraving tool down, and because I knew if I really got involved, I would do nothing else, and which was true. When I went home, I ordered one and just did it and did it, engraved and engraved and engraved, and that's how I got involved with it.
How long does it take you, would you say, just on average, from start to finish to fully complete a cameo carved piece? And let's say just something of average size to what you're accustomed to creating.
Okay, so a piece like this, from when I take it home and start and then start drawing on it, from the first drawing on it until the finished engraving process, might be 150 or 200 hours, something like that.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have averaged what, approximately 6 to 8 pieces a year in terms of vessels, of course, understanding that you do some other work with the copper engraving as well.
Right. It varies quite a bit. If I'm doing really small pieces, I might be able to do like 15 of them a year. As a maximum. Larger pieces, it might take me a month or two to finish a piece. So the mega pieces were definitely 2-month pieces. However, not every year I've, focused on engraving that intensely. I might have do other work as well. So
Absolutely.
it varies.
That was a question from one of our fantastic board members here at the museum, Marjorie Sitter. Thank you for coming this evening, Marjorie. And then Mary Ellen Vixta was very curious about the Tesla commission piece. I believe you said that was a commission work.
It was.
That particular piece, and not to divulge who the commissioner was, but how did that piece relate to electricity and voltage, and what was the inspiration behind creating a piece with the Tesla motif?
That was the challenge, to come up with an image that was based upon Tesla.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that also became the title.
Sure. Thank you.
Just as, the piece that I did for Paul Stankard was based on a poem called Old Ireland. So that became the title of the piece as well.
Okay. And that's a commission for Paul that Paul has in his own collection now. Is that right?
I think he may have donated it to a museum at this point.
We love Paul here. Just another one of our fantastic artists that we get to work with on a regular basis. I do see another question here. Taylor, our glass studio manager, is actually a native of the MSP area. She was curious where in Minneapolis, St. Paul did you blow glass? And as a broader question beyond that, how would you suggest people getting into glass art if they're interested, Lisabeth?
Okay, to start with, when I was living in Minneapolis, let's see, I started blowing glass at Anoka Ramsey Community College, and later took a class at the university. They no longer have a program, but I believe Anoka Ramsey may still have one. Getting involved with a local program is an ideal way to get involved with glass. My first experiences with glass were doing stained glass. I used to play foosball, which is a table game, table soccer, and I had a table and I wanted a lamp for it. So I learned how to make stained glass lamps in order to provide myself with a lamp for my table. But I felt like there was more that I wanted to do other than just stained glass. So I took classes at Pilchuck, and Pilchuck is a great place to learn. There are other programs around the country that you can get involved with. I've taught at Corning, which I really enjoy. And I'm scheduled to do something at Glass Access in the future. There are other programs to check out too. It's a good way.
We're quite fortunate to be able to have the glass studio at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass, and quite excited to be able to expand on the studio as well, and build upon what we've been doing for a long time. And I know Taylor's image here with her and the monkey shows just how excited she is to continue building the glass studio at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass. I recognize that we're getting towards the end of our time together this evening. I wanted to give folks one more opportunity. If you have any other questions that you'd like to ask of Lisabeth's work, of her inspiration, please feel free to do that. In the interim, I do want to let you know that the New on View exhibition is open through Sunday, the 22nd of August. So for those of you who are looking at your calendars or looking at whatever you look at to figure out what day it is right now, that is this Sunday. New on View is open through this Sunday. However, I want to let you know that it doesn't mean that everything from the New on View exhibition is coming down. There are a few pieces that will find their way into other parts of the museum. And one that won't be down for terribly long is Lisabeth's White Light from the Void. So you will have an opportunity to see that once we are able to rotate our new exhibitions in. Our next exhibition at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass is a retrospective of the works of North Carolina-based artists John Littleton and Kate Vogel. And that exhibition runs from the 1st of October through the 13th of February of next year. So I hope everybody has an opportunity to come and see that in person. I don't see any further questions for you, Elizabeth. I just want to personally say thank you very much for agreeing to come on and talk to us about your work, your inspiration. I know that your White Light from the Void is one of a group of favorites of our new acquisitions. And we were very excited to be able to exhibit that and very thankful of Jill Pelisek's generosity in giving that to the museum. And thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening, for talking to our group, but we very much appreciate you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I have a special place in my heart for that part of the country. I grew up both in the Chicago area and in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So it's sort of my old stomping grounds.
Well, we hope that we can welcome you out to the museum at some point. We'd love to show you around and love to show you your piece again in person. It's been probably some time since you've seen this particular one in person. And again, thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for providing so much inspiration to other artists. We are thrilled to have you on this evening. Thank you again for making the time for us. And thank you everyone for participating in this wonderful series as a part of the new On View exhibition here at Bergstrom-Mahler Museum of Glass. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and look forward to seeing you all at the next program. Have a great evening. Thank you again, Lisabeth. Have a good night.
Good night.